Thomas Andre is an absolute monster of a DPS in solo leveling Arise thanks to his crazy ultimate damage. But if you really want to make him deal even more damage, then combining the 4 set effects of Warmonger as well as outstanding ability, you'll be able to get way more damage, because Warmonger does a really good job of increasing your defense by an absolute ton, and it has also received some buffs recently, which is really good. And then also outstanding ability has received some crazy buffs now because it can increase your damage by up to 60%, which is a joke and is a definite must-have for Thomas Andre. But also other sets like the Guardian set as well, increasing your shield effectiveness, can be really good. Burning Curse as well, especially if you really want as much power on your Thomas as possible. But of course, your stats are also going to be extremely important, and for his main stats, on his helmet, of course, additional defense and defense percent will be your 2 best options for you to go for, because Thomas Andre is a defense scaler. The same will also apply to the body armor as well. And then the gloves, it doesn't really matter too much which one you go for, because Thomas Andre doesn't benefit from any of the attack stats. And then finally, for his boots, critical hit damage or defense percent will be your 2 best options. I tend to go for critical hit damage, simply because you can get both of your defense substats on that piece when you do have critical hit damage as your main stat. And then for accessories, of course, HP or HP percent for the necklace. For the bracelet, of course, light damage percent is going to be a must. For the ring, it'll just be like the helmet and also the body armor, additional defense or defense percent. And then finally, of course, the earrings will always give you that guaranteed main stat of additional mana points. But then what's going to be even more important are going to be all of his substats. And overall, additional defense and defense percent is by far going to be the 2 most beneficial stats you're going to want the most, because when you increase his defense, you're not only just increasing his damage, but you're also increasing his shield strength, which can also then buff your damage even more. And then of course, things like damage increase are very important in his kit, as well as also all of your crit stats. Which then moving on to all of Thomas Andre's best cores, and for your mind piece, you'll want to go for the Nameless Demon's Deception, because when you use your ultimate skill, you can increase the critical hit damage of your basic skills by up to 20% for 8 seconds, which will heavily benefit Thomas's damage a ton. The body piece, you want to go for the Nameless Demon's Horn for that extra up to 10% shield you can then apply to yourself for 8 seconds when you use your ultimate. And then finally, for the spirit piece, you'll want to go for the Nameless Demon's Magisphere, because that can then also help recover your mana points. And then overall, the 2 best substats for all of these pieces are going to be critical hit damage and also damage increase. Alright, so now I want to talk about all of Thomas Andre's best advancements. And overall, when you are pulling for Thomas Andre, I'd say the bare minimum you should go for would be A3, because what you can get through A1 is basically the effect that allows you to gain an extra stack of overwhelming power when you do gain a shield. And overwhelming power is probably one of the most important buffs in his entire kit, because you can increase your defense by up to 50% and also increase your shield acquisition chance. But the main function of that buff is to be able to then charge your ultimate instantly when you do stack it 5 times. So this A1 allowing you to stack another stack of overwhelming power is going to be a must-have. The A2 pretty much just increases your crit stats by 10% when you do have a shield effect active, so this one is also really good. But then the A3 is just so important because you can get the overgrowth buff that you can apply to yourself, and this will basically deal light area of effect damage equal to 200% of Thomas Andre's defense, and this can also actually crit. And also for every 1000% of your shield effects that you have applied to yourself, you can then increase the damage of overgrowth by 100%, which can go up to 1000%, which makes this just an absolute joke of a buff. But then if you do have the facilities and also the funds to be able to actually get him to A5, then 100% I would recommend that you do so, because obviously the 16% increase in your defense at A4 is going to be massive in increasing your shield effects and also your damage. But then also his A5 plays a really important role in what best skills you want to level up, because while the Steel Tyrant buff is active, which is his ultimate buff, you can increase your ultimate damage by 125%, which, like I mentioned, now brings me onto all of his best skills for you to level up. And without a doubt, Ruler's Judgment or / Black Hole Crash is easily going to be the skill you want to level up the most, because pretty much whenever you use this ultimate, you get to transform, and then you can then also use your ultimate again to use Black Hole Crash. And this ultimate skill damage can go from just over 3,500% of his defense all the way to just shy of 5,300% of his defense's damage, which is a huge amount of damage. But also the Steel Tyrant buff is absolutely ridiculous, because you can pretty much double your basic skill damage, and it also gives you defense buffs, damage reduction, shields. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. And then his 2 basic skills of Colossal Crush as well as also Absolute Demolition are going to be his next 2 best skills for you to level up, and it doesn't really matter in which order you do them, because they are literally the exact same thing, but just one deals knockdown, one deals airborne, so it doesn't really matter which one you go for. But also when you use these skills, you can then then also instantly activate your core attack, which is Gigantic Hammer Slam, and this will also deal a ton of damage because its damage can go up to 1635% of your defense, and because you do get it with every skill use, you can just deal so much damage. It's an absolute joke. Thomas Andre's exclusive weapon, the True King, is definitely obviously going to be his best weapon because it's made for him. But what this will essentially do is it will allow you to increase your defense by 4% and then also increase your shield acquisition chance by 6%. But then at A5 you can then increase that defense buff to 16% and also the shield acquisition chance to 24%, which overall is definitely going to make it a must-have for you to be able to get the most out of Thomas Andre, mainly just for that defense increase. Which then finally, to end off today's video, we have all of Thomas Andre's best team, his synergies, and also how to actually use him. And two of the best synergies for Thomas Andre are going to be Gogan He, as well as also Charhain, because Gogan He is going to play the role of being your breaker in your team through his skills, as well as also his core attacks and just dealing a ton of damage in general. But also mainly it's because he does play a really good buffing role in your team, because his Will of Brilliant Light can basically increase your whole team's light damage and also crit damage by 8% for every light team member in your team, so you're going to want to run a mono light team. And then also his weapon allows your enemies to take even more light damage, up to 12% for 15 seconds, so yeah, Gogan He is a must-have. But what Charhain does really well is applying things like the brand debuff, but also just because Charhain could also play the role of another DPS on your team, so when you're not using Thomas, you can use all of Char's damage through her ultimate as well, like Light of the End. But also, of course, Min Byung-gu is going to be an absolute go-to support for Thomas Andre if you wanted to use him, but just make sure that you do have your Min Byung-gu at A1 so you can increase all of your team members' crit stats by 12%, as well as also his ultimate buffs like Heavenly Blessing and his critical hit damage increase are going to make your Thomas Andre deal way more damage. And then for all of your shadows, Thomas Andre's team and the Monolight team just overall can use so many different things, because of course Igris for his crit rate increase is really good, Big Rock for his basic skill damage increase is amazing, and then also what I think could definitely be the best shadow for him is going to be Kaisel, because Kaisel can, I believe, increase all of your team members' ultimate damage by up to 8%, I believe, which then leaves Serbi as well as also Iron as two fantastic options for you to go for in terms of supportive shadows, because Iron has a great debuff in his defense decrease, and then Serbi has one of the best debuffs in the game, being Combustion, which applies a permanent 5% damage increase taken to like your enemies, which is so good, which will overall make these shadows some of the best that you can use. But then for actually how you want to use Thomas, if you're using Thomas Andre in a double DPS team, in terms of where you actually position him in your team, it doesn't really matter too much. But of course, if you are going to use a support like Min Byung-gu in your team, then just make sure that you position your support before Thomas Andre does, so he can actually benefit from all of their buffs. But then when it actually specifically comes down to actually using Thomas Andre, all I really need to say is that when you are using his ultimate, just make sure that you don't instantly press his ultimate again to get his extra ultimate damage, because his ultimate buff has a duration of 25 seconds, and also when you do press his ultimate for the first time, the cooldown for his next one is already starting again, which means you pretty much can use the whole duration of his buff to be able to deal as much damage as possible. And then when you bring him in again, he'll pretty much be able to instantly get his ultimate straight away. So make sure that you are just getting the most out of Thomas Andre's kit, and especially his ultimate buff. But overall, if you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to like and subscribe and click the link down below to support me as a creator, because it does help out so much. And as always, I will see you all in the next video. Peace!